I walked into a silent house on my graduation day to find a microwave meal and a text. A week prior, they hired a drone for my sister's party. I didn't yell. I just left. Then my uncle texted, "Why is your dad panicking about the trust fund?" Before we continue today's story, we have an urgent announcement to make. Due to technical issues, we are pivoting towards another channel. Please subscribe to our new channel, Kin and Karma. You can find the link in the video description, the pinned comment, and the collaboration tag on this video. Make sure to switch over now so you don't miss out. Thank you for your support. Now back to the story. The tassel on my cap was gold. It was a silly, small thing, really, a collection of threads bound together to signify summa cum laude. But as I sat in my car in the driveway of my parents' house, staring at that gold tassel dangling from the rearview mirror where I had hung it moments ago, it felt like the heaviest thing in the world. I had just graduated from the state university with a degree in finance, top of my class. It was the culmination of 4 years of sleepless nights, double shifts at the coffee shop to pay for textbooks, and weekends spent in the library while my friends were out living their lives. I had done it. I had crossed the finish line. And the driveway was empty. My parents had attended the ceremony, technically. They had sat in the bleachers, checking their watches. My mother, Susan, had complained about the heat and the hard benches before the procession even started. My father, Mark, had spent the entire time scrolling through his phone, likely checking sports scores or pretending to answer work emails. They had taken exactly one photo of me, a blurry selfie where half of my face was cut off and my mother was looking at her reflection in the screen. And then they had left before the dean had even finished his closing remarks. "Beat the traffic," my dad had texted me while I was still returning my gown. "See you at home." I turned off the ignition. The engine of my 10-year-old sedan sputtered and died, leaving me in a silence that felt suffocating. I looked at the house. It was a beautiful home, a sprawling 2-story colonial with manicured hedges and a fresh coat of slate gray paint. It was the house I had grown up in, the house I had maintained for them for the last 3 years, and yet, looking at it now, it felt like a fortress built to keep me out. I grabbed my bag, the leather worn at the corners, and stepped out. The late afternoon sun was dipping below the tree line, casting long, melancholy shadows across the lawn. My eyes drifted to the backyard gate. Just 7 days ago, that gate had been propped open with a festive wreath. The grass was still recovering from the trampling it had taken. Last week, my younger sister, Bella, had finished her 2nd semester at community college. She hadn't graduated. She hadn't even made the dean's list. She had simply finished. To celebrate this milestone, my parents had thrown a bash that rivaled a wedding reception. There had been a catered taco bar, a DJ, fireworks that had the neighbors threatening to call the police, and a professional drone photographer hired to capture aerial shots of Bella holding a red Solo cup and laughing with her friends. I had spent that party manning the grill because the caterer was overwhelmed. And then cleaning up vomit from the downstairs bathroom after one of Bella's friends had too much to drink. I shook the memory away and unlocked the front door. "Mom, Dad," I called out, my voice echoing in the foyer. A silence. The house was dark, the blinds were drawn. There were no balloons, there was no banner. There was no smell of a home-cooked meal or even takeout. I walked into the kitchen, the heels of my sensible court shoes clicking loudly on the marble tiles. On the pristine granite island, sitting alone in the center of the vast empty space, was a single cardboard box. It was a frozen lasagna. The family size, brick you buy for $10 when you can't be bothered to cook. Next to it was a sticky note in my mother's handwriting. "Dad and I took Bella to the mall to look for a summer outfit. Heat up the oven to 375. Congrats." I stared at the note. I stared at the lasagna. I felt a coldness spread through my chest, starting at my heart and radiating out to my fingertips. It wasn't the lack of a party. I wasn't Bella. I didn't need a drone or fireworks. It was the effort. It was the absolute, total lack of effort. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a notification from the family group chat. Mom sent a photo. It was a picture of Bella in a dressing room, twirling in a sundress that probably cost more than my entire semester's textbook budget. The caption read, "Our little fashionista, so proud of her summer vibes." Then a second message, almost as an afterthought, "Adelina, congrats on the school thing. Don't forget to bring in the mail." The phone slipped from my hand and clattered onto the counter. I looked at the frozen block of pasta, then at the dark, empty kitchen. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was violent. It screamed at me. It told me exactly where I stood in the hierarchy of this family. The betrayal wasn't in the action itself, it was in the indifference. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis of a terminal illness because it was a choice they made every single day. They didn't just forget me, they actively chose not to remember. I stood there for a long time, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the room. I didn't cry. I think I had cried all the tears I had for them years ago, somewhere between my 16th birthday, which they forgot because Bella had a dance recital, and the day I got my acceptance letter, which they used as a coaster for their coffee. Instead of tears, I felt a strange, cold clarity. It was as if a fog had lifted, revealing the machinery of my life for what it truly was. I wasn't a daughter to them. I was a utility. I was the reliable appliance that kept the house running, the finances in check, and the problems solved so they could focus all their energy on the golden idol that was Bella. The front door unlocked. Voices drifted in. "I'm just saying, Mark, the blue one was more flattering," my mother's voice carried down the hall. "It was $300, Susan," my father grumbled, though there was no real heat in it. He never said no to them. They walked into the kitchen, bags from high-end boutiques rustling in their hands. Bella was in the lead, looking radiant and flushed with excitement. She stopped when she saw me standing by the island, still in my graduation dress, the frozen lasagna untouched on the counter. "Oh, hey," Bella chirped, tossing her hair. "Did you see the dress? It's so cute. Mom says I can wear it to the lake house this weekend." Mom followed, dropping her keys on the counter. She glanced at the lasagna. "Elena, honey, why haven't you put that in the oven? We're starving. Shopping is exhausting." She didn't look at me. She looked past me at the oven display, checking the time. "I graduated today," I said. My voice was quiet, but it was steady. My father walked in last, loosening his tie. He looked at me, then at the lasagna, then gave a dismissive wave of his hand. "We know, Elle, we were there, saw you walk across the stage and everything. Good job." "You left," I said. "You left before I even got my diploma holder." Dad sighed, the heavy, exaggerated sigh of a man who feels he is being unfairly burdened. He walked over to the fridge and grabbed a beer. "The traffic was going to be a nightmare, Elena. You know how I get in traffic. Besides, you're done now. That's the important thing." "You threw Bella a party with a drone photographer last week," I said. I hadn't planned to say it. The words just fell out of my mouth, heavy and sharp. "For finishing a semester. I graduated summa cum laude, and you bought me a frozen lasagna." The room went quiet. Bella looked awkward, pretending to be interested in a hangnail. Mom stiffened, her expression shifting from distraction to annoyance. "Oh, stop it," Mom snapped, waving her hand as if swatting away a fly. "Don't be dramatic. You know how sensitive you get." "I'm not being dramatic," I said, turning to face my father. "I'm asking why there is such a difference. Why does she get fireworks for existing, and I get a microwave meal for excelling?" Dad cracked open his beer, the hiss of the carbonation sounding like a gunshot in the quiet kitchen. He took a long sip, then looked at me with eyes that were completely devoid of empathy. He shrugged. "Look, Elena," he said, his tone patronizing like he was explaining simple math to a toddler. "Bella is, well, she's vivacious, she loves a party, she feeds off that energy. You're serious, you're quiet, you've always been independent, we just thought. You're not really the celebrating type. We figured you'd want a quiet night in. We were trying to respect your personality." Respect my personality. It was such a seamless lie. It was the narrative they had constructed to justify their neglect. Alina doesn't need anything because Alina is strong. Alina doesn't want attention because Alina is quiet. I see, I said. And I did see, finally. Well, Mom asked, tapping her manicured nails on the granite. Are you going to put the lasagna in, or do I have to do everything around here? I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had given birth to me, who was currently looking at me not with love, but with the expectation of a master addressing a servant. No, I said. Excuse me, Mom blinked. No, I repeated, I'm not putting the lasagna in. I turned around and walked out of the kitchen. Alina, don't you walk away from me. My father's voice boomed, the authority finally kicking in now that his comfort was threatened. Get back here and make dinner. I ignored him. I walked up the stairs, my heart pounding a rhythm against my ribs. I went into my room, the room I had painted myself, the room where I had studied until my eyes burned, and I pulled my suitcase from the closet. I didn't pack everything. I didn't have time. I packed the essentials. My laptop, my binder of important documents, birth certificate, passport, social security card, my external hard drive, a week's worth of clothes, my toiletry bag. Downstairs, I could hear them arguing. Mom was complaining about my attitude. Bella was asking if they could just order pizza instead. Dad was grumbling about how I was being moody. They had no idea. I zipped the suitcase shut. I took one last look at my room. I stripped the sheets off the bed, habit, I suppose, not wanting to leave a mess, and tossed them in the hamper. I walked back downstairs. They were still in the kitchen. I could see them through the archway. Dad was leaning against the counter, scrolling on his phone again. Mom was pouring wine. I walked past the kitchen to the front door. Alina, Mom called out, hearing the front door open. Where are you going? You verify the credit card statement tonight, remember? The bill is due tomorrow. I paused, my hand on the doorknob. You're smart people, I called back, my voice flat. Figure it out. I stepped out into the cool evening air and pulled the door shut behind me. The click of the latch was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. I got into my car, threw the suitcase in the passenger seat, and reversed out of the driveway. As I pulled onto the main road, the house shrinking in my rearview mirror, my phone buzzed again. It wasn't the group chat this time. It was my Uncle David, my dad's older brother, the black sheep of the family, not because he was bad, but because he was successful, stern, and didn't tolerate my parents' nonsense. He lived 3 towns over. The text read, "Why is everyone freaking out? Your dad just called me screaming that you stole the ledger. What is going on?" A small grim smile touched my lips. My parents thought I was just the quiet daughter who kept to herself. They thought I was just the live-in maid and the buzzkill. But in their arrogance, they had forgotten one crucial thing. For the last 3 years, as part of my contribution to the household, I handled all the paperwork. I handled the bills. And most importantly, I handled the communications with the family trust that Uncle David managed, the trust that paid for the house, the cars, and Bella's tuition. I hadn't stolen the ledger. I was the ledger. And they were about to realize just how expensive their quiet night in was going to be. To understand the sheer magnitude of the mistake my parents had just made, you have to understand the dynamic of the chaotic ecosystem that was my family. My parents, Mark and Susan, were what you might call lifestyle rich, but liquidity poor. They loved the appearance of wealth. The slate gray Colonial, the least luxury SUVs, the country club membership they barely used, it was all a facade maintained by a very specific financial drip feed. That drip feed came from my grandfather's estate, now controlled by Uncle David. Grandfather had been a shrewd businessman who didn't trust his youngest son, my father, with a lump sum. So he created a trust. The trust paid for essentials: housing, education, medical. It did not pay for vacations, designer clothes, or drone photographers. However, my parents were masters of creative accounting. Or rather, they forced me to be the master of it. Since I was 19, the deal was simple. I lived at home rent-free while I finished my degree, and in exchange, I managed the household administration. At first, I thought this meant chores. I quickly learned it meant shielding my parents from reality. I was the one who itemized the receipts for Uncle David's quarterly audits. I was the one who had to creatively categorize Bella's educational trips to Cabo spring break as cultural enrichment seminars on the expense reports. I was the one who logged into the portals, paid the utilities, and juggled the credit cards to keep their credit scores from tanking. I did it because I was young, I was scared, and I thought that if I was useful enough, they would finally love me. If I saved them enough money, maybe they'd spend a little of it on me. But they never did. The antagonist of my life wasn't a villain twirling a mustache. It was the two-headed monster of my parents' narcissism. Susan was the architect of the favoritism. She saw Bella as an extension of herself, beautiful, bubbly, and destined for a life of leisure. Bella was the doll Susan liked to dress up. I, on the other hand, looked like my father's side of the family, dark hair, sharp features, serious eyes. To Susan, I was staff. I was there to make sure the stage was set for her and Bella to shine. Mark was the enforcer. He was a weak man who masked his insecurity with bluster. He didn't care about the details, only the results. As long as the internet worked, the fridge was full, and Uncle David kept signing the checks, he didn't care how it happened. He treated me with a mix of indifference and annoyance, like I was an IT guy he couldn't fire because I was the only one who knew the passwords. And then there was Uncle David. David was the only person in the family who terrified my father. He was a retired corporate litigator, a man who viewed emotions as inefficiencies. He controlled the purse strings. If he suspected fraud or misuse of funds, he had the power to freeze the assets immediately. My parents had spent years terrified of David finding out about their spending habits. They relied on me to be the buffer. They relied on my meticulously prepared spreadsheets to keep David happy and the money flowing. Tonight, however, the buffer had just driven away. As I merged onto the highway, heading toward the only place I knew I could go, my phone rang. It was my mother. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again, my father voicemail. Then a text from Bella. Dad is losing his mind. He says you locked him out of the bank account. He can't order the pizza. Stop being a bitch and send the password. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. I hadn't locked them out. I had simply changed the two-factor authentication number from my phone to, well, nobody's. I had removed my number. The account was now trying to send a verification code to a landline that we had disconnected 5 years ago. But that wasn't the real problem. The real problem was the email sitting in my drafts folder. See, Uncle David had sent me a request 3 days ago. He wanted the fiscal year review for the trust. He wanted to know why the home maintenance costs had tripled in May. My parents had told me to categorize the backyard bash, the fireworks, the drone, the catering, as emergency landscaping and foundation repair. They claimed the fireworks were pest control, technically true if you consider silence a pest, and the tent rental was structural shoring. They had bullied me into drafting the fraudulent report. Just do it, Alina. Uncle David doesn't need to know the details. We're a family. You want Bella to have a good memory, don't you? I had drafted it. It was sitting on my laptop. But I hadn't sent it. And now, driving into the night with a frozen dinner in my rearview mirror and a lifetime of neglect fueling my foot on the gas pedal, I realized that for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to cover for them. I picked up my phone and dialed Uncle David. Elena, his voice was gruff, surprised. I just got off the phone with your father. He sounds like a lunatic. He's babbling about you stealing the internet. I didn't steal anything, Uncle David, I said, my voice calm. But I think we need to talk. Can I come over? I have some clarifications regarding the fiscal year review. There was a pause on the line, a heavy, pregnant silence. Clarifications, he asked, his tone sharpening. Yes, I said. specifically regarding the foundation repair and the $20,000 allocated for educational supplies for Bella. "Come straight here," David said. "I'll put the kettle on." The drive to Uncle David's house was a blur of highway lights and the rhythmic thrum of tires on asphalt. My phone continued to vibrate on the passenger seat, a relentless buzzing that felt like a trapped insect. 15 missed calls from Mom. 10 missed calls from Dad. 3 texts from Bella. I didn't answer. I couldn't answer. If I heard my mother's voice, that shrill mix of victimhood and command, I might turn the car around. I might apologize. I might go back to being the invisible glue holding their fragile reality together. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that if I went back now, I would never leave. Uncle David lived in a modern, minimalist house that seemed to float above the tree line. It was all glass and steel, cold but undeniably impressive. As I pulled into the driveway, the motion sensor lights flooded the area with stark, white illumination. David was already standing at the front door, wearing a cashmere cardigan and holding a mug of tea. He didn't wave. He simply watched me get out of the car with the same critical eye he used to dismantle opposing counsel. "You look like hell," he said by way of greeting as I walked up the path. "Thanks," I muttered, dragging my suitcase behind me. "It's been a long day." He stepped aside to let me in. The interior of his house was just as immaculate as the exterior. Not a speck of dust, not a single item out of place. It was the complete opposite of my parents' cluttered, chaotic home, where half-finished projects and impulse buys littered every surface. "Your father called again," David said, closing the heavy front door. "He claims you hacked the bank accounts. He's threatening to call the police." I let out a short, incredulous laugh. "He can try. The accounts are in his name. I just removed myself as the administrator. He doesn't know the passwords because he never bothered to learn them. He's locked out by his own incompetence, not by malice." David raised an eyebrow. "And the trust. He mentioned something about freezing the assets." I took a deep breath. This was it, the point of no return. "I didn't freeze anything," I said, meeting his gaze. "But I haven't submitted the quarterly report yet, the one due tomorrow." David's expression hardened. He gestured toward his home office, a room lined with bookshelves and dominated by a massive oak desk. "Let's sit." I followed him into the office. I sat in one of the leather chairs opposite his desk, feeling small but strangely powerful. I opened my laptop and placed it on the desk. "David," I began, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. "For the last 3 years, Mom and Dad have strongly encouraged me to categorize certain expenses in a way that would be palatable to the trust." David leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Explain." "The emergency roof repair from last spring," I said. "That was a 2-week cruise to the Mediterranean for Mom and Bella. The tuition supplement for Bella's summer courses. That was a down payment on a new convertible for her birthday." David didn't blink, he didn't gasp. He simply stared at me, his face an unreadable mask. "And the foundation repair for this month." "Bella's graduation party," I said. "Fireworks, drone photographer, catered taco bar for 50 people." "I see," David said quietly, "and you helped them do this." "I was 19, I said, my voice cracking slightly. "I was living under their roof. They told me it was creative accounting. They told me everyone does it. They told me if I didn't help, we would lose the house." David sighed, rubbing his temples. "And today, what changed today?" "I graduated," I said. "Summa cum laude, top of my class in finance. And they gave me a frozen lasagna and left me alone in the house." David looked at me for a long moment. Then, slowly, a grim smile spread across his face. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a shark that had just scented blood in the water. "Open the laptop," he said. "Show me everything." For the next 3 hours, we went through every receipt, every bank statement, every email thread where my parents had explicitly instructed me to fix the numbers. David didn't say much, only asking for clarification on dates and amounts. He took notes on a yellow legal pad, his handwriting sharp and precise. By the time we finished, it was past midnight. My phone had finally stopped buzzing. "This is substantial," David said, leaning back in his chair. "This is fraud, Alina, pure and simple. They have misappropriated over $200,000 of trust funds in 3 years." "I know," I whispered. "I'm sorry, I should have told you sooner." "You were a child," David said firmly. "And you were being manipulated by 2 people who should have protected you. You are not the villain here, Alina. You are the witness." He picked up his phone. "I'm going to make a call. We need to secure the accounts before they do any more damage. And tomorrow we are going to have a family meeting." The next morning, the sun rose with a cheerful brilliance that felt mocking given the storm that was brewing. I had slept in David's guest room, a restless sleep filled with dreams of drowning in spreadsheets. When I walked into the kitchen, David was already dressed in a suit, sipping coffee and reading the news on his tablet. "Eat," he commanded, sliding a plate of toast and eggs toward me. "You'll need the energy." "What's the plan?" I asked, picking at the toast. "We are going to your parents' house," David said. "I have summoned them. I told them we need to discuss the technical difficulties with the bank accounts." "They're going to scream," I warned. "Let them," David said calmly. "Screaming doesn't change the numbers." We drove to my parents' house in David's sleek sedan. When we pulled into the driveway, I saw my father's SUV parked haphazardly on the lawn, as if he had come home in a rage the night before. The front door was unlocked. We walked in. The house was a mess. There were takeout boxes on the coffee table, wine glasses with lipstick stains on the counters, and a general air of panicked disarray. "Alina." My mother appeared at the top of the stairs, wearing a silk robe and looking like she hadn't slept. Her hair was wild, her eyes rimmed with red. Behind her, Bella peeked out from her bedroom door, looking scared. "You ungrateful little brat," Mom shrieked, descending the stairs. "Where have you been? Do you have any idea how worried we were? And the bank, your father has been on the phone with the bank for hours. They won't let him in without the code." "Susan," David's voice cut through her tirade like a knife. Mom froze. She hadn't seen him standing behind me in the foyer. Her face went pale. "David," she stammered, pulling her robe tighter. I didn't know you were coming. We're just having a little domestic dispute. Teenage rebellion, you know how it is." "Alina is 22, Susan," David said coldly. "And she is a college graduate, hardly a teenager." My father emerged from his study, looking disheveled and frantic. He saw me and his face twisted into a snarl. "You," he roared, pointing a shaking finger at me. "Give me my phone. I need the code, now." "Sit down, Mark," David said. It wasn't a suggestion, it was an order. My father blinked, his momentum faltering. He looked from me to David, sensing the shift in power. "David, she locked us out. She's trying to sabotage us." "She didn't lock you out," David said, walking into the living room and taking a seat on the sofa. "She resigned, and because you are incompetent, you don't know how to run your own household. Now, sit." My parents sat. They huddled together on the love seat, looking like 2 children called to the principal's office. Bella crept down the stairs and sat on the bottom step, watching with wide eyes. "Alina has brought some discrepancies to my attention," David began, opening his briefcase and pulling out a file. "She's lying," Mom blurted out immediately. "Whatever she told you, it's a lie. She's jealous of Bella. She's always been jealous." David ignored her. He pulled out a piece of paper. "This is an invoice for foundation repair, dated May 15th. Amount, $12,000. The contractor listed is Sky High Productions." My father went white. "Now," David continued, his voice devoid of emotion, "I looked up Sky High Productions. They are not a foundation repair company. They are a drone photography and event planning service." "That must be a mistake," Dad stammered, sweating profusely. "A clerical error. You know how Alina is with the paperwork. She gets confused." "I don't get confused, Dad," I said, speaking up for the first time. My voice was stronger than I expected. I have the emails. You sent me the invoice with the subject line, "Hide this under house stuff." You little snake, Mom hissed, lunging forward as if to grab me. Sit down, David barked. Mom recoiled, shrinking back into the cushions. This is not just about a party, David said, pulling out another stack of papers. This is about a pattern, the roof repair, the medical expenses, the tutoring. It's all fake. You have been siphoning money from the trust to fund a lifestyle you cannot afford. We're family, Mom cried, tears streaming down her face now. David, please, we just wanted the girls to have the best. Is that a crime, wanting the best for your children? For one child, I corrected her. You wanted the best for Bella. I got a frozen lasagna. Oh, get over the lasagna, Dad shouted. It's pasta, who cares? I care, David said. And the trust cares. The trust has strict stipulations, Mark. Funds are for essential maintenance, education, and health, not for parties, not for designer clothes, not for vacations. We can pay it back, Dad said quickly, desperate. We'll refinance the house, we'll make it right. The house belongs to the trust, David said. You can't refinance it, and you don't have the income to pay this back. You're broke, Mark. Without the trust, you are destitute. The silence that followed was deafening. My parents looked at each other, the reality of their situation finally crashing down on them. My parents were cornered animals, and like any cornered animal, they lashed out. This is all her fault, Mom screamed, pointing at me. She set us up. She's been planning this. She's been hoarding the money, probably. Check her accounts, David. She's the one with the finance degree. She's been skimming off the top. It was a pathetic attempt at deflection, but it stung. Even now, faced with irrefutable proof, they couldn't take responsibility. They had to make me the villain. David didn't even look up from his papers. I have already audited Alina's personal accounts. She has less than $2,000 to her name. Most of her earnings went to paying your utility bills when the trust allowance ran out for the month. Bella stood up from the stairs. Wait, she said, her voice trembling. Mom, you said the party was a gift from Grandma's estate. You said it was my inheritance. It was, Mom lied, turning to Bella with a desperate smile. It was, honey. Uncle David is just being mean. He's always been jealous of your father. There is no inheritance for you, Bella, David said bluntly. Not until you turn 25, and even then it is contingent on completing a 4-year degree, which, according to these transcripts, you are not on track to do. He pulled out another paper. Community college transcript, 1.8 GPA, 3. Withdrawals, 2 incompletes. Bella's face crumbled. She looked at our parents. You said you handled my grades. You said you talked to the professors. We did, Dad said. They're just difficult people. No, David said. You didn't. You paid a consultant $5,000 to write essays for her, another fraudulent expense. The web of lies was unraveling, thread by thread. David, please, my father pleaded, his voice cracking. Don't do this. Don't cut us off. We have a reputation in this town if people find out. You should have thought about that before you committed fraud, David said. I have a fiduciary duty to the trust. I cannot allow you to continue embezzling funds. Embezzling, Mom gasped. That's such a harsh word. It is the legal word, David said, and I am a lawyer. He stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the manicured lawn that had been paid for with stolen money. Here is what is going to happen, David said, turning back to face them. I am freezing the discretionary fund immediately. The trust will pay the mortgage and the utilities directly. No more cash allowance. No more credit cards. But how will we eat? Mom whispered. How will we buy groceries? Mark has a job, David said, and Susan, perhaps it is time you got one too. A job? Mom looked horrified. I haven't worked in 20 years. Then you have a lot of catching up to do, David said. And Bella, David continued, looking at my sister, you will enroll in classes yourself, you will attend them yourself, and you will pass them yourself. If you don't, the tuition payments stop. This isn't fair, Bella cried, stomping her foot like a child. I can't believe you're doing this to us. Elena, tell him to stop. Tell him you made a mistake. I looked at my sister. For the first time, I didn't see the golden child. I saw a spoiled, stunted girl who had been crippled by our parents' indulgence. I didn't make a mistake, I said softly. I made a choice. I hate you, Bella screamed. I hate you, you ruined everything. I didn't ruin anything, I said. I just turned on the lights. My father stood up, his face red with rage. Get out, he snarled at me. Get out of my house. You are no daughter of mine. Mark, David warned. No, Dad shouted. She wants to be independent? Fine, she's out, she's cut off. Don't come back here, Elena. Don't you dare come back here. I looked at my father. I looked at the man who had ignored my graduation to scroll on his phone. I have no intention of coming back, I said. I just came to get my things. You have nothing here, Mom spat. Everything you have, we bought you. Actually, David interjected. The car is in my name, the laptop is hers, and her clothes. Well, I hardly think you want her used t-shirts, Susan. Take her, Dad yelled. Take her and go, I don't want to see her face again. David nodded slowly. He closed his briefcase. Very well, he said. Come, Elena. We walked to the door. As I reached for the handle, I turned back one last time. My parents were standing in the middle of their beautiful, empty living room, surrounded by the wreckage of their own lies. Bella was sobbing on the stairs. You forgot one thing, I said to them. They looked up, eyes filled with hate. The verify code for the bank, I said. It sends to the landline, the one you disconnected in 2019. I saw the realization dawn on my father's face. He scrambled for his phone, frantically dialing the bank, screaming at an automated system that couldn't hear him. I walked out the door and didn't look back. The fallout was immediate, but the climax, the true shattering of their world, didn't happen in the privacy of their living room. It happened a week later at the annual Founders Gala for the local historical society. My parents were prominent members, a status bought with grandfather's money and maintained through sheer force of social climbing. They had RSVP'd months ago. I was not invited, obviously, but Uncle David was a board member, and this year he brought a guest. I wore a dress I bought with my own money, a sleek, dark blue sheath that made me feel powerful. David wore his tuxedo like armor. We walked into the ballroom, the crystal chandeliers glittering overhead, the air thick with the scent of expensive perfume and old money. My parents were there, holding court near the bar. They looked strained. My mother's smile was too bright, her laughter too loud. My father was gripping his drink like a lifeline. They were putting on a performance, pretending everything was fine, pretending the credit cards hadn't been declined at the grocery store that morning. When they saw us, they froze. The color drained from my mother's face. My father took a step back, almost knocking over a waiter. David led me straight to their circle. The people around them, the mayor, the bank president, the head of the PTA, turned tea. Oh, greet David with genuine respect. David, the bank president boomed, shaking his hand. Good to see you, and who is this lovely young lady? This is my niece, Elena, David said, his voice carrying clearly over the gentle hum of conversation. She just graduated summa cum laude in finance. I'm very proud. The group murmured their congratulations. My parents stood silent, their smiles fixed and brittle. Mark, Susan, the mayor said, clapping my father on the shoulder. You must be bursting with pride, top of the class, that's quite an achievement. Yes, my father managed to croak. Yes, very proud. She's actually joining my firm next month, David announced. This was news to me, but I didn't flinch, I just smiled. We need someone with her eye for detail. She recently uncovered a rather significant discrepancy in some family accounts. Saved us a fortune. The air in the circle changed instantly. The smiles faltered. The bank president's eyes narrowed slightly. In this world, financial impropriety was the ultimate sin. Is that so? the bank president asked, looking from David to my sweating father. Indeed, David continued, smooth as silk. It seems there was some confusion regarding the allocation of trust funds, educational expenses being used for other things. He didn't name them. He didn't have to. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Every person in that circle knew my parents. They knew about the vacations, the cars, the parties. They did the math. My mother let out a small, strangled sound. "David, please." "But it's all sorted now," David said cheerfully, raising his glass. "Thanks to Alina, she's quite the auditor. I'd be careful around her, Mark. She sees everything." The humiliation was absolute. It wasn't a screaming match. It was a surgical dismantling of their social standing. In 5 sentences, David had labeled them as frauds and elevated me as the competent, ethical one. The circle broke up shortly after. People drifted away, suddenly finding urgent reasons to be elsewhere. My parents were left standing alone, isolated in the middle of the crowded room. My father turned to me, his eyes filled with a mixture of hatred and fear. "You think you're smart?" he hissed. "You think you've won." "I wasn't trying to win, Dad," I said calmly. "I just wanted you to see me." "We see you," my mother spat, tears of rage welling in her eyes. "We see exactly what you are, a traitor." "No," I said, "I'm the one who kept the lights on." I turned and walked away, leaving them standing in the ruins of their reputation. The aftermath was swift and brutal. With the discretionary fund frozen, my parents' house of cards collapsed. The leased SUVs were repossessed within the month. The country club membership was revoked for non-payment. The cleaning lady, the landscaper, the pool guy, they all quit when the checks started bouncing. Bella dropped out of community college. Without the consultants to do her work, she failed every class. She moved back home, where the atmosphere was toxic. She and Mom spent their days fighting, blaming each other for their misfortune. Dad tried to get a job, but at 55, with a resume that was mostly exaggerated consulting gigs for his friends, he found few takers. He eventually landed a position in sales at a mid-tier logistics company. It was humbling work, and the salary was a fraction of what he was used to spending. I, on the other hand, flourished. I took the job at David's firm. I worked hard. I moved into a small apartment in the city, a place I paid for with my own money. It wasn't a mansion, but it was mine. I bought my own groceries. I cooked my own meals. And every time I made a lasagna, I smiled. 6 months later, I received a letter. It was from Bella. "Alina, I know you probably won't read this, but I wanted to say, things are bad here. Mom and Dad fight all the time. The house is a mess. The power got cut off last week for 2 days. I got a job. I'm working at a boutique in the mall. It's not great, but it pays. I'm saving up to move out. I think I finally understand what you meant about the lights. I'm sorry for everything, for the party, for not standing up for you. I was stupid and selfish. I miss you. Bella." I stared at the letter for a long time. I thought about the girl who had twirled in a $300 dress while I ate a frozen dinner. I thought about the sister who had called me a bitch for not giving up a password. But then I thought about the terrified girl on the stairs, watching her world crumble. I picked up my phone and dialed her number. "Hello," Bella's voice was small, hesitant. "Hi," I said, "it's Alina." There was a silence on the other end, then a sob. "Alina, I didn't think you'd call." "I got your letter," I said. "How's the job?" "It's hard," she sniffled. "My feet hurt all the time. Customers are mean. Is this what it's always like?" Pretty much," I said gently. "But it gets better. You get used to it. And the money feels different when you earn it." "Yeah," she whispered. "It does." We talked for an hour. It wasn't a complete reconciliation. There was too much hurt for that, but it was a start. She told me she was looking for a roommate. I told her I knew a few people in the city looking for a sublet. I never spoke to my parents again. They sent emails, long, rambling diatribes blaming me for their misery, alternating with pathetic pleas for money. I filtered them directly to a folder labeled spam. Uncle David and I have Sunday dinner every week. He's teaching me how to play chess. He says I have a knack for strategy. You see the whole board, Elena, he told me once, moving his knight. Most people only see the piece in front of them. I learned the hard way, I replied, capturing his pawn. I had to watch the board while everyone else was watching the fireworks. My life is quiet now. There are no drones. There are no grand parties, but my bills are paid. My conscience is clear. And when I look in the mirror, I don't see a ghost anymore. I see a woman who walked through fire and came out holding the match.